Well, hello there, mate. It's nice to see you today. My name's Bryan Winn. I'm a renowned scientist and friend of the animal kingdom. I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about a few topics involving our friends the animals, including the evolution and domestication, as well as we've got the animal behavior and then the animal welfare as a result. And finally, we're going to end on a little bit of animal breeding. So if you'd like to join me on this adventure today, we're going to have one good time together, you and I. So you might be wondering, why are the animals the way they are today? Well, there are two little processes that happen throughout the time. It's evolution and domestication. The first is evolution. So evolution occurs when an animal has more desirable traits to survive in its environment and eventually reproduce. This process is called natural selection. So with natural selection, how it works is the animals who are not fit to reproduce or survive in their environments die off, and thus their lines die off. Meanwhile, the adaptations that allow other animals to survive are carried over, and that creates evolution, and that's why we have the animals the way they are today. So the other part of this process came after that is domestication, which happened when people started keeping the animals in pens, and soon after that it led to when people started taking the animals and creating more animals through animal breeding. So by creating these animals from animals in the pens, they were selected for traits that allowed them to interact with humans and to be used by humans for benefits reaped by the humans themselves. So through these two processes, the animals have changed vastly over time, and now we'll go on to talk about animal behavior. So what happens sometimes by breeding these animals and domesticating them, we have situations where the animals are reacting differently to different stimuli in their environment. So in doing this, it's important to notice that it's not just the attitude of the animal. It's not like the animal has a bad attitude about things. It's actually how it's reacting to its environment. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into learning a bit more about animal behavior. So first, we'll talk about the animal learning. So there are two different types of animal learning. There's non-associative and associative. Non-associative relates to an animal not reacting to a stimuli, but getting used to something. For example, habituation. That's when an animal gets used to something and stops reacting to it as aggressively or as much. So for example, like wearing a collar, eventually the animal will stop going for the collar and stop resisting against it and just become used to it. And that's habituation. That's the non-associative type of learning. Then we've got the associative learning, where the animal is responding to some kind of stimulus or some kind of reward. So first off, we have classical conditioning, and classical conditioning occurs when the animal is taught to respond to a certain stimulus in a certain way. So for example, you teach an animal to do a trick, and in a reward they get a treat. So another example of associative learning is operant learning, and that's trial and error. So the animal does something and it does it over and over again until it does it correctly and gets rewarded. If it does the wrong thing, it gets punished. Imprinting occurs immediately after birth, and it's when the animal becomes used to its social order. It's very instantaneous, but the animal learns to adjust to its environment, and that will take it through the rest of its life. Animal behavior itself manifests in different ways. For example, an animal can make sounds to indicate things to other animals, or maybe it hears something and then it reacts a certain way. Another way is smell. If it smells something a certain way, it may react to that. And then, of course, you got your touch, you got your taste, and you got your sight. And so all of these are indicators of animal behavior, and all of them can affect how the animal behaves, or can be a way that the animal expresses how it's feeling. Additionally, there are these things called stereotypies. They occur in animals when they're in unfamiliar environments. For example, if you pen an animal up, it's going to act a certain way than it might in nature, and it makes sense in nature, but it wouldn't make sense in an enclosure. For example, some animals will kick their stalls when they're in the stalls, and this is a destructive behavior for both the animal itself and for the environment around it. But you must remember, this is not the animal's fault, it's simply a reaction to its environment. And with a little bit of enrichment, you can start to work down these stereotypies, although you can never completely get rid of them. So of course, in talking about animal behavior, we have to consider animal welfare. So there's a vast range of ideologies on animal welfare and how they should be treated. We've got the abolitionists who believe that animal use is not for humans. And then we've got on the other side, we've got the ownership. So the people that believe that animals exist to be owned by humans and to be used by humans. So because of this, there's a wide range of spectrum on beliefs on animal welfare. For example, one is feelings-based. People believe that animals may have feelings and that those should be accounted for. And then another is natural environment. The animal should be in something as close to its natural environment as possible so that it's not uncomfortable. And then finally, of these three, we've got choice. And the animal this is the idea that the animal should be able to choose what kind of environment it wants, what kind of resources it wants. However, the most accepted one is the 5 freedoms. So we have the freedoms from hunger and thirst. And then additionally, we have a freedom from discomfort, and then a freedom from pain, injury, and disease, and the ability to exist in a normal environment and exhibit normal behavior. And then finally, we've got freedom from fear and distress. So those are the 5 freedoms in the most accepted version of it, although animal welfare on the whole tends to encompass those 5 freedoms as well as a natural environment for the animal, and then of course an environment in which the animal can function to its fullest potential. Last section, we're talking about animal breeding. So it's important to note with animals, they have a phenotype or their exhibited trait, but additionally there are these nested ideas beneath that. There's the genotype and the environment. So the animal's growth, for example, you have the size of the animal that may be more dependent upon the environment, and that's a quantitative trait because it's related more to the environment than it is to the genotype. And meanwhile, you might have something like the shape of an animal's horns. So the horns themselves, the shape of it will have almost nothing to do with the environment, but it'll have more to do with the genotype or the animal's genetic makeup, which results in it being a qualitative trait. So when it comes to breeding, you have multiple different courses. You've got inbreeding, in which you breed within the line very closely. So that includes you have your mother and maybe the son, and then you create a child from that, and that's inbreeding. And then you have line breeding, which is when you'll have a more distant relative within the same line, like a granddaughter to a grandfather. And then finally, we've got the outbreeding, and that comes in the form of outcrossing, which is crossing with a different lineage, or even crossbreeding, which is crossing with a different breed. So it's important to note, with a little help from science, we can do even more crazy things. For example, we can create transgenic organisms, which are organisms that have traits that are not typical of an organism of that type and do not occur in nature. So these organisms have modifications that can only be made in the lab. Additionally, you can clone animals, so you can create another version of them that has the same genetic makeup, or alternatively, you can clone their DNA to implant in other animals, or you can even clone their tissues to use in therapeutic research for humans. So, as you can see here, we have it's not quite a crossbreed, but more just a cross between a human and a horse, called a horman, and it is quite incredible. It's the ultimate accomplishment in my life's work, and right here you can see why I am the acclaimed expert on the animal kingdom and scientist that I am. So with that said, we are done with our animal breeding section. So today I've taken you on a little journey through the history of animal origins, then down to the animal behavior and the resulting animal welfare, and finally we ended with animal breeding, and I showed you my incredible creation. So with all that said, I hope you enjoyed our little journey together, and I hope you got something constructive out of it, and don't forget to have a great day and to treat your animals bloody well.